Hello friends and fellow book nerds, I'm Aisling and I'm here today to talk about books. More specifically about being intentional with the books that I own. So I'm going to do a little bit of an unhaul today. And basically I don't have a whole lot of space for books. I have a Billy bookshelf and a half Billy bookshelf. And that's the space that I have for books. For some people it's a lot of space, but for me, I want a whole library. I want that, rolling ladder. I want all of that, right? But for the moment, this is the space that I'm working with, and I'm trying to be really intentional about the books that I buy physically and then the books that I hang on to. I essentially want to curate like my perfect library with like my favorite books or books that I've found have really impacted me in some way. So today I've pulled 10 books from my shelves to make space for future books, or to just make space in general. It's been a bit packed. And so I'm gonna talk you through what I'm getting rid of and why. So let's get started. So in no particular order at all, Nevernight by J. Kristoff. I read this only recently, and we follow a girl called Mia Corvair who is basically on a warpath to get vengeance for basically her dad being killed in a public forum, and then her mum and her younger brother being taken away, so she's left on her own, and she wants to deal with the people that have been responsible for this. So Mia ends up becoming like a bit of a warrior, and she goes off to this school, the Red Church, to become a blade. And so it is a fantasy, and I have heard very mixed reviews on it, and I read it and I thought it was fine. It is the first of a trilogy, but I've decided I'm not going to continue with it because I only thought it was okay. But I do know that somebody else out there will love it, so I'm going to pop it into a little free library. Hopefully somebody else will get a lot more from this than I did. Right, okay, so the next book I read, I believe, the start of this year, and it probably needs no introduction as well. It has a Netflix adaptation on the way and everything, so we know we're talking about the big ones. So it's All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. So we follow Marie-Laure. She's a blind girl and she's living with her dad, and it's during, I believe, World War II. So she's in Paris and her dad is the best. He makes like a little miniature of the city and their neighborhood so she can kind of figure out her way around, and they have a really lovely relationship. But her dad ends up going missing. Poor Marie-Laure ends up kind of being on her own in a place that she doesn't know, and she ends up in a house with a distant relative, and it's all very tense, it's all very sad. It's a beautiful book, it's beautifully written, really short chapters as well, if that's something that you love. I would recommend reading it, but I'm not going to keep it because it didn't do for me, I think, what it did for a lot of people that really loved it. And I know, again, there'll be somebody out there that will really appreciate this book in a little free library. It's a funny one because I did really enjoy it, but I know I'll never read it again, and I feel like I'm already kind of forgetting it, so it hasn't impacted me in maybe the way that I would have expected it to, which is fine. I really liked his writing though, and I'm really looking forward to reading Cloud Cuckoo Land. The next one is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. So we follow Piper, and she is a spoiled rich girl, and she ends up basically messing up quite on a ginormous scale. So she is sent by her stepdad to live in this small seaside town. Yes, everybody feels like she's not cut out for it. Her sister goes with her. They basically are left in this really drab building. It's an old pub or bar that her dad used to own and run, but he has passed away since, and they have no connection to this place or anything at all. So everyone thinks they can't do it, and everyone thinks it's going to be a major mess up. She meets a beautiful man, of course, and so on and so forth. I won't spoil the entire story. I'm not a big romance reader. I wasn't super into this. It was grand. I'm never going to read it again. I'm going to pass it on. Next one is also the first of a series. It is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So we follow Jude and her sisters as they are brutally taken from their slain parents and taken to this magical world. I know this book is highly lauded on like Book Talk and Bookstagram and BookTube as well, but it wasn't really for me. I just didn't feel the high stakes. I just couldn't get into it. It was missing something for me. They're brought to this place and they don't have kind of magical gifts or anything like that, and they're sent to school and everybody works out way better than them because they all have magical gifts, and poor Jude and her sisters don't. There is a bit of political intrigue in this and there's a bit of romance. All of it added up to the book that I have no intention of continuing with. So the next book was actually shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2020. It's one that I haven't seen or heard much of online, kind of on the Book Talk, Bookstagram sphere. It is Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi, and in this book we follow our narrator Antara, who's caring for her mother Tara, I believe, and her mother Tara has dementia, and it basically describes not just the impact of the dementia on Tara but also the life that the two of these have lived up to this point. I won't give too much away. I actually did quite enjoy this book. I know some people found it really difficult to read. It's a very tense relationship between mother and daughter, but it's quite interesting and it's quite short as well, only 229 pages. So I hope that somebody out there enjoys this as much as I did. I'm just never going to read it again, and I just don't feel the need to have it on my shelf. The next book was a very divisive book. It was shortlisted for the 2021 Booker Prize and also for the Women's Prize. It was Patricia Lockwood's debut novel, No One Is Talking About This. This is a bizarre novel. It's genre defying. It's quite strange. So we follow a woman who is basically famous for her social media posts, and she travels around the world and like talks to fans and, you know, has this big life. But then she gets a text from her mom. Her mom says to her, something has gone wrong and how soon can you get here? So it's a novel that really doesn't read like a traditional novel. It's quite strange, and I understand why some people really just did not enjoy it. For me, I found it a little bit difficult to get into, but once I got there, I was in it, and it's a lot more heartfelt than I was expecting as well. It's definitely one that's not for everybody. I read it because I was really curious about kind of why it was so divisive, why so many people just weren't into it, and then why some people loved it. I think I was more on the I really enjoyed it camp. It's not one that's particularly memorable for me personally, and I'm not going to read it again, so off we go with that then as well. The next one is also one that was involved in the Women's Prize, so it was longlisted for the Women's Prize in 2022. So it is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. This book, we follow a woman named Martha and her husband, and their marriage is not doing the best. We follow Martha as she grapples with kind of her mental health, and it's something that she struggled with her whole life. It's affecting her marriage dramatically. I won't say too much more, but this book was so highly recommended by so many people. People thought it was in a way groundbreaking in the way that it speaks about mental health and the way that mental health affects a person's everyday life, everyday relationships, that kind of thing. As somebody who has dealt with those sort of issues myself, I quite looked forward to reading it, but I did find for me that I don't know what it was about it, but I did find it fell a little bit flat. There were some really lovely heartfelt moments in it, but I just don't think it was for me. It just didn't quite get there, and I don't know where there is, but it didn't get there. But I know that it's helped a lot of people out there, and I know that a lot of people really love this book. One thing I will say is I really appreciated how the ending didn't conclude in the way that I was expecting all along, so that was good. I do think it's a decent read, but it's just one again that for me didn't quite make the cut. The next one is a book by an Irish author, and it's one that I haven't heard a whole lot about online again. I really enjoyed this and I really want more people to read it. It's very strange. Again, I know that it just won't be for everybody. Well, firstly, what's it called? What is the book, Aisling? It is We Are Not in the World by Conor O'Callaghan, and we follow a man who is a truck driver and he's driving across, I believe, Europe. Excuse me, it's been a while since I read this. And his daughter tags along with him as well, and we follow them and kind of their relationship, and we hear about how they got to where they are, and it's a really kind of intimate portrait of their relationship. This book packed a punch. The ending, I just didn't expect this to go where it went, but I don't want to again say too much. But I found it really beautiful and just really sad, and sure, look, we all know that that's my genre of book. I'm going to pop this into a little free library because I know I'll never read it again, but also I'd love somebody else to pick it up and hopefully feel about it the way that I did, or even partially. So I would recommend this kind of with trepidation because I know that everybody won't enjoy it, but I loved it. Our second last book I only read recently, and I actually at the time gave it 5 stars, but in hindsight I'm like, I enjoyed it, but I don't think I loved it that much. I think it's kind of forgettable. In a sense, it was just, in hindsight, a book about boys will be boys. So yeah, it was The Lincoln Highway by Immortals. I did love this. So we follow 2 brothers, Emmett and Billy, as they set out on a road trip to go to San Francisco to find their mom. But unfortunately, things happen. A lot of things happen. It's a chunky book. This follows them as they set out and meet some characters that maybe aren't the pinnacle of society and the things that they do. And for the most part, there aren't any terrible characters in this except for one. Like, there is one who is just irredeemable. I did find there was a lot of heart in this. There was a lot of like, just what the hell is going on? Like, how did they get here? And I found Billy, the younger brother, maybe to be a little bit too old for his age. I believe he was supposed to be 8, and sometimes, you know, he was like an old man, the things that were coming out his mouth, which is fine. I still loved him. I was able to overlook that. Again, I just don't think I'm going to read this again, and I think it'd be nice for somebody else to pick it up and have a go. And then we've reached the very last book on the list, which again was a book talk and bookstagram and booktube favorite. So it is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. So I read this, I think, last year. So the book starts out with Oliver Marks, who is just released from prison for a crime that he may or may not have committed, and he meets the policeman or the detective that was in charge of his case, kind of bringing him down essentially. The detective asks him to tell him the story of what really happened, and so this is what we get. So we follow a group of students in a university who they basically exclusively study Shakespeare. And in this book, which you may find incredibly pretentious, the core group of characters speak to each other a lot of the time in Shakespearean verse. If you're not into that, don't read this book. If that sounds terrible to you, you will not like this book. I found it quite interesting and I really wanted to see where it goes. There is a bit of intrigue in it. The group of characters, you know, they're morally grey at best. We do find out what happens in the end, and the ending to me was quite satisfying. I didn't love it. Again, it was grand, and I'm going to pass it on to somebody that will love it more than I did. So that's the lot for now. I am hoping that as I read books, I will be able to whittle them down a bit like this, and hopefully one day significantly improve and curate my own magical library, ideally behind a little secret door with like a lovely big cushiony window seat with a view of like a forest or the sea or something. Essentially, I'm hoping to win the lotto. I guess I'll need to with the amount of books that I really want to buy, but as things stand, I'm trying to be incredibly intentional and also trying to share books that I think other people will really enjoy. That's that for today. I hope maybe you've gotten some recommendations there. Do you agree with the fact that some of these books just didn't hit the mark for me? Is there anything there that you'd like to read personally? I hope you're doing well. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to give a like or subscribe if this is the kind of content you're into, and as ever, it doesn't matter if it's not your thing. It's all good. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you're minding yourself. I hope you're being good to yourself, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.